Blockchain has been taking the world by storm over the last 5 to 10 years of its existence. In this video, I'm going to explain why I think there's realistically only one use of blockchain, and why a lot of change in the world that's saying it's been using blockchain really hasn't, and what that's actually done for the technology landscape. I'll talk about 5 key points I want to run through. Firstly, the volatility. Secondly, the energy use required. Thirdly, the issue with reversing a transaction on the blockchain. Fourthly, the lack of any projects that really have used blockchain single-handedly. And finally, most importantly, how blockchain may have actually done something accidentally really well. I'm Matt Grace, Managing Director of Flying Donkey, and let's get into it. Before I jump into my 5 points, let's talk about the one use that I think for blockchain, and that is Bitcoin. Blockchain is really well set up as a single purpose technology to run and operate Bitcoin. It does that job very well, though it does have some downsides, and I'm going to run into what they are. From a technology perspective, blockchain was touted as a thing that could solve all problems, and it really just isn't that. In the first few points, I'm going to explain why it's a challenging piece to use for Bitcoin. And finally, I'm going to show you why some of the projects that use blockchain haven't actually really used it internally, and how they've got around by using it in a different way. Step 1, volatility. So blockchain's really poster child is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has had a huge amount of press and fanfare over the years that it's been here. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is a currency and it's meant to be used as an exchange of value. The problem with Bitcoin is actually being used as a speculation currency, and it has wild swings between 5 and 5,000% in very short periods of time. Unfortunately, for a currency, this is really bad. Imagine one day you had money and you were going to go buy a loaf of bread. Today, that loaf of bread costs $1. Now, let's imagine that you earn $1 per week, so you can buy that loaf of bread this week. Then let's have a think about next week. The value of your dollar has actually increased from $1 to $5,000. How is that going to work for the loaf of bread? Does it need to change to be $5,000? Do all wages need to change? This is why generally currencies are very consistent and don't change a huge amount. Their value is inherently stored and linked to inflation. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is hugely speculated against, and why it's such a hard way to use it as a currency. It's just too volatile. So while intrinsically it works well as a currency, the volatility aspect of it really makes it not fit for purpose on what it's doing. Secondly, energy use. The blockchain runs on a distributed computing network. This distributed computing network is run by people called miners. These miners run and operate this network in a distributed way that was the key cornerstone of the blockchain. The thing to keep in mind here is that mining and running this distributed network actually consumes a significant amount of energy. There's actually a reason for this. Mining on the blockchain is a key component of how the blockchain works, and essentially it makes it harder for computers to solve the calculations over time, thus taking more computational power and thus making more energy. Various studies around the world have tried to piece together exactly how much energy Bitcoin uses, but it's safe to say that it is not a very efficient way to run a piece of network. Let's just say it's not a very efficient use of energy. I'll talk more about this later about achieving outcomes. But the key point to make here is that the distributed computing network uses a huge amount of energy. You can think about this as a bunch of people coming together to build essentially a distributed cloud network. But at the same time, there's an overarching piece built into the blockchain that makes computational power harder and harder to solve over time, therefore using more and more energy to run the network. Irreversible transactions. This is something that's not really talked about too much on the blockchain. It's a key part of how it works, and also a key deterrent as to why it's not really working well in the field. When you make banking transactions, you sometimes make mistakes. And what you do is you ring your bank, which is essentially a trusted third party who investigates that piece and then reverses it. Now, the problem here with the blockchain is that inherently it's a trusted system, and therefore, once you've committed to the blockchain, it's committed for life. You can't actually go to an individual third party and reverse it. This is actually a core piece of why the blockchain is so popular. It doesn't have this third party looking over it and making sure it's okay. The problem is when something goes wrong, like a transaction is sent to the incorrect person, you're realistically relying on that person's goodwill to send that money back, as there's no intermediary essentially ensuring that party, or there's no intermediary ensuring that payment is going to be correct, and they won't be reversing it for you. So in principle, not being able to reverse transactions sounds good and a strong policy. In practice, it doesn't actually work, because unfortunately, people make mistakes, and sometimes they need to reverse the transactions that they've made. So my first 3 points, I've highlighted why the blockchain is really struggling to take off in a single use, which is Bitcoin. But in these next couple of points, I want to highlight that some of the other things it's actually succeeded at that it was not intended to do. Blockchain was originally factored as the be-all and end-all solution to all technology problems. And this happens with new technology when it comes to the fray. In point 4, I want to discuss the lack of success in blockchain development. Now, you can find some projects that have used blockchain and have used them successfully, but these projects are very few and far between, and they're very niche projects that don't really solve a wider goal. Most labs or innovation labs that have been set up to use this technology generally try them and try and work out how they're going to operate and how they're going to work, but through various reasons, they struggle to look at them and actually make them viably commercially. The failure rate of these projects is somewhere in the high 90%, and the reason for that is they're really trying to use technology for a one-size-fits-all solution, when it's really not. But this leads me to my final point, creating and selling change. Blockchain has actually done amazing things for these innovation labs. Prior to blockchain, trying to get change into an organization was very, very difficult. When blockchain came along, it got into the minds and imaginations of managers and really got them thinking about how they could improve their business for the better. And what this meant is that the change process was actually opened up and allowed to enter into a business. So while blockchain was originally touted as a solution to their problem, after a period of time, the actual solution to their problem was using traditional technology means as standard web apps or mobile apps in order to solve their problems. And this is actually a really good outcome for businesses. They're using technology in their business to try and improve and succeed. The down part here, in some of these instances, it's never reassessed that blockchain was actually never used. There's a number of documented projects where blockchain was touted and won awards for various things that it does. But once picked apart at a technology level, the actual contribution by blockchain inside that software was minimal to almost non-existent. And this is because once you start looking at what blockchain does and how it works, it doesn't really lend itself to commercial applications. As originally mentioned, it's really, for me, a single sole use purpose, and that is to run a currency. And I think it runs a currency really well. I highlighted some of the issues the currency may have. In the long term, these may filter out. Blockchain from a commercial perspective really struggles because essentially as a business, you're putting yourself as that trusted intermediary. And that's blockchain is trying to get away from. It's trying to get a fully distributed, non-trusted network where every actor on the network self-authenticates and self-verifies. So while there's some really interesting ways that blockchain has been tried to use, at the end of the day, they really haven't succeeded for this sole problem. But as mentioned, I think blockchain has been an overall positive impact on the technology landscape because it has instigated change in businesses where change otherwise wouldn't have happened. To summarize this up, blockchain is a really good technology, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be used in your business. Technologies take time to mature and get refined in order to be commercially viable. Blockchain is still a young technology by comparative means, and I think in the future it may come to the foray in a number of areas. But right now, blockchain is the poster child of the buzzword, and really it's trying to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I talked about how it's really a one-use piece at the moment, where Bitcoin is really its poster child of what's done really well. But there are a number of drawbacks, particularly around volatility, energy use, and irreversibility of transactions. But at the same time, it has had a positive impact on the change of businesses. So while it is a buzzword, and while it hasn't really been successful in a lot of commercial projects, has allowed businesses to open up and make innovation labs and look into technology where solutions were found, even though they weren't in the blockchain, they wouldn't have been found anyway, even if they were eventually found in traditional technology means. If you're interested in doing a blockchain project, or interested in working out how that may suit your business, or you've got an innovation lab that you really want to start using traditional software, feel free to reach out and have a chat. We'd be happy to help.